Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Public Works for today, Wednesday, March 23rd, 2016.
Commissioner James, Repenning and Jacinto are present. President James, we have a quorum. May we start with Bureau introductions, please, starting with Bureau of Street Lighting.
Good morning, Ruben Flamenco, Bureau of Street Lighting.
Good morning, Gary Harris, Bureau of Street Services.
Good morning, Ali Posti, Bureau of Sanitation.
Good morning, Samara Ali Ahmad, Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, Hannah Choi, Bureau of Contract Administration.
Good morning, Lori Rittenberg, City Attorney.
Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. President James, we did not receive any speaker cards under general public comment. However, we did receive a speaker card on item number 3 for today's agenda.
Okay, then we'll close general public comment. Our first item of business, the approval of the meeting minutes from the meeting of Monday, March 7th, 2016. Is there a second to my motion to approve those meeting minutes? By Commissioner Jacinto. Any objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved. Agenda item number 1. The receipt of bids, or not, for a project at, in Council District 1, Los Angeles Neighborhood Initiative, Highland Park Improvements along Figueroa between Avenue 50 and Avenue 60. I understand, Mr. Campos, we don't have any bids?
That is correct. No bids received.
Okay, then we'll go back to the Council office and the Bureau and determine what they want to do going forward. Agenda item number 2, Bureau of Engineering for Council District 15, recommending the board authorize the city engineer to issue a revision to task for solicitation number 12-085A to the Geotechnical Professionals Incorporated, increase the budget authority from $99,000 to $180,000 for the geotechnical engineering services during construction for the Gaffey Pool and Bathhouse project. Easton Fortier.
Good morning. My name is Easton Forcier. I'm in the Bureau of Engineering, Geotechnical Engineering Group, and I'm requesting authorization of the city engineer to issue a revision of this task order. This project is located in a hillside environment, or a hillside area in San Pedro. It consists of the restoration of a historic swimming pool, and then we're also constructing a new bathhouse, several retaining walls, pathways, ADA compliant ramps that will extend from Gaffey up to the pool and the bathhouse. Our consultant, Geotechnical Professionals, has been out there ever since the beginning of the project, and they are performing the construction monitoring on our behalf and with our oversight. There's been primarily the main reasons for the increase, the revision, are due to scope and schedule. Scope, we had near the beginning of the earthwork a lot of archaeological trenches, old historic slit trenches from World War II. Again, it's the old Fort MacArthur base. So there was a lot of earthwork associated with that. We've had additions of a lot of utilities. There's a new booster pump. And again, in a hillside area, it results in a significant amount more. There was also some schedule delays associated with the project. Construction has moved, I would say, typically slower than it would on a regular project. Again, and as you'll see, our consultant realizes they're a little bit behind with their maybe-weeby because they were initially expecting this to be exempt. They realize now they have some catch-up to do, and they pledged to meet the 12 and 2. And again, we're requesting the amount be increased from $99,000 up to $172,000 with a contingency of $8,000 for a total of $180,000.
Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. Easton, thanks for your report. I was fortunate to want to thank Mumwood for taking me out there to see this great historic pool for CD15 in that area. It's great view overlooking San Pedro Harbor. It is a very hilly area, and I saw that. I saw all the architectural challenges, and so I understand the increased scope of work, and it's a great project. Look forward to that coming up next year.
Easton, is this going to get us there on Gaffey?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know it's, as you said, it's been kind of planning and scope. The archaeological stuff, I suppose, was a bit of a surprise, but I would like to know if this is going to get us there or not. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you had mentioned briefly the work that you're doing on the inclusion. Could you just elaborate a little bit in terms of what some of the challenges were and what some of the goals are going to be moving forward as it relates to that. I see that it appears that you definitely have at least a plan of MBE, WBE subcontractors that you've reached out to.
Yes. So your question is specifically about what resulted in the increased scope?
Yes, I'm just asking you to elaborate on our plan for MBE, WBEs, or inclusion, if you will.
I was notified by our consultant that they will, upon authorization, they will have their subs out there immediately. They are out there on average right now about a half day every day or every other day. So it won't take long for them to get up to their pledge participation levels. Again, and these subs will be doing the work that they're doing right now, which is the geotechnical construction monitoring, compaction testing, observing the earthwork, essentially the same work that they're doing right now.
Great, great. Well, I'm glad to see that we have reached out and that the inclusion, even though it's not a federally funded project, that the identification of the various subs from various communities, I think, is very important. So I appreciate that.
Anything further? Is there a motion on number 2 by Commissioner Jacinto? I'll second it. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 2. Any problem sending it back forthwith? We'll send it forthwith. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 3, Bureau of Engineering for Council District 11. Recommending the board approve the request for a variance from the height limitation requirements and approve the request for a hardship waiver from the below grade requirement of the above ground facilities ordinance and allow Verizon to install a 38.5 high monopole in the public right-of-way adjacent to 1233 East Rose Avenue. Mr. Ledoux, you can set us up here before we hear from Mr. Searcy.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Ledoux. I work for Bureau of Engineering Central District. As said here, this is a Verizon cell site with a wood monopole 38.5 feet high. It has 12-foot cross arms and 6 panel antennas, as well as a standard electric meter cabinet, a full-size climate-controlled vault with 2 vent stacks. It requires a hardship waiver because it's near open space. It's actually a secondary highway that splits a rec and park area that includes a golf course. We have heard no complaints about this. There was no appeal. Normally when we're talking about public facilities, I normally do not get appeals in those instances. It's in CD 11, which is Mike Bonin's council district, and they're remaining neutral on this also. And it did not require a planning department recommendation.
And no objections?
No objections.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ledoux. Any questions for him before we hear from Mr. Searcy? Mr. Searcy, anything?
No, I think Mr. Ledoux has summarized the project to the extent possible. I'm open for any questions that might arise.
Okay. Any questions for the rep? Commissioner Jacinto?
Thank you, President James. Rob, good to see you again. This is a big one. It's a big pole in the public right-of-way, and you know it almost looks like an amusement park ride. It's so huge, and because I think we're trying to help our city be more livable and sustainable. These are necessary, these permits, and that is our job as a board to take care of these issues. I also want to, ask my colleagues to consider when they're like this in the public right of way that I would like there to be some camouflage, some treatment so that it's just not out there like it is. And I understand that creates financial hardship on the applicant. But I want to condition that. I want to ask my colleagues to condition that, to have you come back and to really say that this is, because that's the way we're going to be moving in the future. These things in the public right away they're so massive, and we want to do better aesthetically. Technically, there's no issue technically. It's aesthetically to make the public right away a little bit more pleasing as you go down. So, President James, I want to ask for a condition on this application to have it, the installation of a camouflage or a monopalm type of setup to hide this array. I think it's within our right to be able to do that.
Mr. Searcy, regarding the request, any thoughts?
Oh, I have thoughts. I understand the need to integrate this into the aesthetics of the community and to really nullify or mitigate those adverse impacts. In this circumstance, I think we might be willing to do that, but in order for me to put in a monopalm here, there's some things that you need to consider. I have a very narrow right-of-way. I only have about 10 feet from the back of curb in order to place a monopalm. I have the reservation for BSL within that first 4 feet, so I would have to go back to them and actually get an approval to drop a case on, because when I'm putting in a monopalm, it has, depending on the height and the wind conditions and the attachments, I may have a case on that goes down 20 feet. So I would assume that not to be an issue here, because I do already have a vault that I'm proposing within that same area. One of the other things that I have to consider is that I've got an ADA restriction that really is impacted when I have such a narrow right-of-way. I also have palm fronds that extend out. At the location where we are now, I would have to move 18 inches behind the curb face. The diameter of a monopalm is about 32 to 36 inches, so that eats up about 3 feet. So now I'm about 4.5 feet in. On a secondary highway, typically, I would have to ask Public Works if I have to extend out to 6 feet. I know on a major highway, I have to provide a 6-foot ADA path of travel. At that point, I'm so constrained that I have to be within that very narrow area. I have a lot of fronds that would extend in the right-of-way. If I move it further into the right-of-way, I then extend over private property, which I can't do from the right-of-way. So I would say that I'm willing to look into it, and I would like to be able to come back and do that. If I have to also consider the cost that's now involved, because we're proposing a vault so that we can mitigate the aesthetic impact of placing the extensive equipment within the right-of-way above grade. So we've dropped that in a vault. The city recently has applied new standards for us that's really doubled my construction cost for dropping a vault. I would probably have to entertain those same costs here. Now I'm also talking about adding maybe as much as $150,000 to the cost of the facility. In order for me to recoup the investment, I would probably have to ask if maybe I could increase the height of the monopole a little bit so that I could extend my footprint out to capture more of the residential area to the north and east of the site. That way I would be able to recoup my return on investment to meet the standard that Verizon Wireless typically likes to employ. So with that, if I can look at those things and maybe come back in 2 weeks and give you a solid answer, I would like to do that.
So what I'm hearing is maybe we continue this item for a later date for you to be able to determine whether or not the condition is something that you're going to be able to satisfy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much time do you need, Mr. Searcy?
If I could come back at the next meeting, I think I can be able to do that.
What did you say, 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Okay.
I really want to investigate whether or not the aesthetics on the palm tree would really work. I don't want to give you a palm tree that looks like it's dying. I want to give you a full-blown quality aesthetic mitigation, so I want to investigate the appropriateness.
So, Mr. Campos?
President James, the 2 weeks date from now would be Wednesday, April 6th. April 6th is the tentative date that this board is planning to be off-site at Crenshaw High in Council District 8 for your off-site meeting. We could schedule it in the morning and then also have an evening meeting, or we can consider an alternate date, or maybe 2 weeks and 2 days to Friday, April 8th.
How about Monday, April 11th?
That would be
Is that
fine.
okay? Let's do
Yes,
Monday,
sir.
April 11th.
That works.
Yes,
Thanks.
continue it to Monday, April 11th then. Thank you, Mr. Searcy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cinto. Agenda item number 4. Thank you, Mr. Ledoux, by the way. Number 4, Bureau of Engineering, Bureau of Contract Administration for Council Districts 1 and 8. requesting the mayor and city council authorize the board to execute an amendment number 3 to contract with FSY Architects Incorporated, extending the contract term from March 23rd, 2016 to March 22nd, 2020 for pre-qualified on-call architectural services for various municipal facilities projects. Mark Nakata.
Good morning. My name is Mark Nakata. I'm representing the Bureau of Engineering's Architectural Division. As stated in the agenda, the Bureau of Engineering is requesting that we extend FSY's pre-qualified on-call architectural services contract for another 4 years to March 22, 2020 in order to complete 2 projects that the consultant is currently working for us. First project is the Manchester Junior Arts Vision Theater located in Council District 8. It's a very project with a long time frame, started early in 2005. It's a multi-phasic project. Phases 1A, 1B was recently completed in December 2013. Bureau of Engineering still has phases 2, 3, and 4 that still needs to be completed, and we need this time extension as these project phases are still currently in design and not yet in construction. The other project that we need this extension for is for the Lincoln Park bathhouse and pool replacement in CD1. This project has also a long history. We awarded this contract, this project to FSY several years ago. We were about to go to bid in 2009. Unfortunately, project funding was eliminated. So in 2013, additional funding was identified. We went back to the board to issue a sole source task order for this project, and this project is currently in the bid and award phase. Because of these, we wouldn't be requesting this extension if it wasn't for these 2 projects. And obviously, because of the long history of them, there's going to be changes to the composition of the utilization of subconsultants. We had subconsultants unfortunately pass away, subconsultants going out of business, and that required FSY to conduct additional outreach and bring additional subconsultants on board. Also, the specialization of these projects, we have theater, acoustical, and lighting specialists for one, and for the Lincoln Park pool, we have an aquatics subconsultant that needs to be brought on board. So we hope with this 4-year extension, we will be able to go through the bid and award process, complete construction funding, and in the event that there are changes or if additional funds are required from the FSY, we will report back to the board to amend or get an extension for these task orders. And at that time, if there are obviously changes to the composition of subconsultant utilization, those will be reported as well.
It's a really old contract, but these are long-term projects. Obviously, they become that. So thank you for the report, Mark. That helps with some of the questions I had. Any further questions on agenda item whatever number we're on, 4? Commissioner Davis has made a motion that we adopt agenda item number 4, seconded by Commissioner Jacinto. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt number 4. We can send it back forthwith. Thank you. Good luck in the next 4 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Agenda item number 5, requested bid rejection, Bureau of Street Lighting and Bureau of Contract Administration, Council District 6, recommending the board declare VT Electric Incorporated the first low bidder to be non-responsive, and for the board to reject all bids submitted on October 21, 2015 for the Sun Valley Lighting Improvement Phase 5 CDBG project. Ms. Choi on number 5.
Good morning again. So the project was proposed to install 40 new modern concrete street lighting poles with energy-efficient LED luminaires in residential areas where there are no lighting. So we received 5 bids. Unfortunately, we the first low bidder failed to pass the business inclusion program requirements. They, instead of conducting the outreach online through the BOVIN as required by the contract language, they did the traditional way of making phone calls and doing that outreach. Unfortunately, the contract language specifies that all bidders must perform the outreach on the BOVIN. And so when we notified the contractor, they claimed that their compliance officer was not aware and did it the traditional way. The contractor was present at the pre-bid meeting and heard the presentation, and so I think this is a situation where maybe the engineer came and attended but did not relay the requirements back to the head office, and so they failed to do that. Unfortunately, the second low bidder, their bid amount exceeds the amount that is authorized through the grant, the CDBG funds. So street lighting is recommending that we reject all bids, that the board reject all bids, and that they complete the work with their own forces.
Okay. Any questions at all? Thank you. Commissioner Davis has made a motion that we adopt agenda item number 5 as requested. I'll second it. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 5. Any problem sending it back forthwith? We'll send number 5 forthwith. Thank you, Ms. Choi. Agenda item number 6, Office of Accounting and our Executive Officer requesting the Mayor and City Council receive and file the financial status report with the Public Works Trust Fund number 834 for fiscal years 2009-10 through 2014-2015. And I might just say before you begin, Fernando and Vicky, thank you for the work that went into this and bringing this report to us for what has become a backlog of years for various reasons. And we really look forward to getting caught up on this. As Vicky knows, well, both of you know, but Vicky longer than Fernando from sitting in meetings with me. So thank you, and go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Victoria Santiago. I'm the Director for Office of Accounting, Board of Public Works. Office of Accounting accounts for all the projects and about 200 funds in the entire Department of Public Works. Anything financial business entered into by all 5 bureaus, including the board office, are accounted for by the Office of Accounting. Public Works Trust Fund is just one of those funds, and we are about to, our Executive Director is going to do a presentation, and after that we will be ready for questions.
Thank you, Vicki. Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. First of all, good morning to all commissioners, bureau representatives, city attorney. Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. I wanted to say thanks to the staff that actually put a lot of work and effort into this. As President James indicated, this has been something that we've been working on for at least 9 months since I started my tenure here with the Board of Public Works almost a year ago. And I'm very pleased that we're at this point. It has been a six-year backlog in trying to get this report out. There's been various factors of why that has not happened, but I'm focusing on getting it done and moving forward and actually starting the dialogue with City Council, the Mayor's office, and the CAO's office. One of the things that I heard when I first started this job is that there's a lot of money in our Public Works Trust Fund, and we ought to dip into it so that we can move forward with some projects. So with this analysis, I want to demystify some of those conceptions that are out there and actually lay out what is actually available and what is not available and what may be available. And so those are the types of dialogues and types of discussions that I want to have within the next couple of weeks with City Council and the Mayor's office and CAO's office. So with that, we'll go ahead and do a quick 5-minute presentation, just a quick overview of the report, the background and the purpose, some of the oversight issues that we've have been dealing with in terms of governance and accounting and financial reporting. The report also covers the financial status in terms of dollar amounts, what we have, what we've earned in terms of interest, and some of the outstanding loans that are in our portfolio as of June 30, 2015. One of the things that I want to quickly reiterate is that this report is for 6 years. So this is from fiscal year 2010 all the way through fiscal year 2015. The reason why we are presenting a 6-year status update is that in 2007, City Council, with the Budget and Finance Committee, the chairman, Councilman Krikorian, instructed our staff to provide annual reports to the City Council. The good news is that in 07, 08, 09, that was done, and then in 2010, we submitted our report. However, the report was not acted upon by City Council. There's a couple of reasons why sometimes City Council does not act upon these reports. One of them is that if it just doesn't make it to the calendar over a 2-year period, there is a default rule that indicates that once 2 years has lapsed, City Clerk is instructed to remove those council files off the system. Another reason is that there could be controversial or complicated issues that perhaps need to be vetted out. The report that was submitted to Council back in 2010 did include the status update report, but it also included an establishment of a loan policy. That could have been bifurcated at that time so that the council could have accepted the report as opposed to establishing the loan policy, and I'll explain to you what that means in a few minutes throughout the presentation. But why is this required? It's really required because of the charter, City Charter Code, Section 581F and 582. Basically, it indicates that the Board of Public Works should have all cost incidents to propose change or improvements in the public right-of-way should be reported, and we should recover all costs when possible. In addition to that, 582 instructs the Director of Public Works to provide a filing or a report to the Mayor and City Council on the work performed by the department. So this includes the Public Works Trust Fund number 834. As indicated, we have a 6-year backlog. The Public Works Trust Fund, ironically, we don't really know exactly when it was created. We have been working on this for several years, way beyond the 6 years. I think this has been going on for about a decade or two in terms of when exactly was the Public Works Trust Fund was created. What we do know is that we have records that the first or one of the initial deposits was made in 1940. So we can see that it's been around for about 75 years. In 2010, City Council did instruct the City Attorney's Office to draft some ordinances to not only memorialize the creation of the Public Works Trust Fund, but also to bring it up to date in terms of the new codes and new regulations that City Council wanted us to move in that direction. In terms of volume, we have about 12,000 depositors in the Public Works Trust Fund. One of the things with a depositor, you could have one depositor, i.e. a permittee or a private developer that may have a couple of deposits that go with that depositor. So the 12,000 depositors doesn't represent the entire transaction of the Board of Public Works Trust Fund. We currently have an estimated about 20 to 22,000 deposits on file composed of 12,000 depositors. The Public Works Trust Fund serves as a trust fund. It works like an escrow account, a bank account, where we actually hold the money for the specific purpose for Public Works related projects. We also hold funds that are related to violations, fees, settlements, surcharges, and donations. That is a small percentage of our entire Public Works funds. It represents about 4% of the entire balance in our trust fund. So 96% is dedicated to a Public Works related project. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So in terms of governance, instead of going all through the details, it's really about 4 different things that we were looking at for the Public Works Trust Fund and oversight. We are looking at governance, so we have been meeting on a monthly basis for about 7 to 9 months regarding the Public Works Trust Fund, looking at the reconciliation, also looking at internal controls. One of the difficulties in doing the reconciliation, one would think that we would just look at the deposit and say, do we have the money? Do we account for it? Do we reconcile to the penny? And if the answer is yes, let's move forward with the report. The difficulty in doing the reconciliation is that we have an obsolete, a very dated system that's been around for about 30 years plus, which is what we call the Public Works Trust Fund subsidiary ledger. This is a ledger account that works like a database that's standalone away from the city's financial management system. The city's financial management system, also known as FMS, is the city's official financial recording system. So when we reconcile, we're not only reconciling against the deposits with the depositors, but we're also reconciling against the Public Works Trust Fund subsidiary ledger, and we're also reconciling against the the city's financial management system. So it's almost a 3-prong process, and if one penny is off on any of those 3 systems, then we go back to the drawing board and we try to figure out where that penny is, and we have actually balanced to the penny, which is I'm very pleased with the results. We also look at management and then also our accounting using proper accounting, cost accounting standards, and then also our financial reporting is a requirement for the oversight. The Public Works Trust Fund is a liability of the city, and it is included in the comprehensive annual financial reports that are submitted to the Comptroller's Office and released from the Comptroller's Office to the public. In terms of balance, which is what most everyone wants to know, how much money do we have in the Public Works Trust Fund? As of June 30, 2015, the balance is $101.3 million. This fund balance has increased over the last 6 years from about 68.6 all the way to the 101.3, about 48% increase, or about $32 million over that 6-year period. Next slide. In terms of the breakdown, so of this $101 million, how much is really available so that we can move forward with some of the projects? So out of the $101.3 million that's available, we have about $30.9 million that has been lent out. And I'll talk about those loans outstanding to other departments in a few minutes. So that leaves us with a cash balance of about $70 million. Of that, we have about $2.7 million that's been appropriated, meaning that it's been encumbered. It's already been earmarked for a specific function. In addition to that, we have some pre- and post-1989 restricted balances, which is about $10.4 million. One of the things with the pre- and post-1989 restricted balances, this is where we are planning to do a nexus study. The nexus study in fiscal year 16-17 that's been proposed to the mayor's office and the CAO's office would allow us to look at a reasonable relationship of what we have in our Public Works Trust Fund in terms of the deposit, where the deposit site was, and what the intended purpose was for that deposit at that time. The goal with the Nexus study is not only to look at reasonable relationship, but also to do a geoplotting where we can find out where the deposit site was at the time versus what we're currently doing now with the Public Works Trust Fund, and layer those two geoplotting, if you will, layers, so that we can determine whether there's a reasonable relationship. That reasonable relationship could be 1 block, it could be 1 mile, it could be a council district boundary, and we are planning to define that for you and come back hopefully within the next 6 to 9 months so that we can determine what that reasonable relationship is. That would be coming before your board to establish a new policy and then going to council for adoption. If all parties agreed, then we would be able to possibly utilize that $10.4 million for potential future public works projects. One thing that I would caution with that $10.4 million is that the results from the Nexus study could come back that we have to cheat or we are unable to use that for other purposes. So before we actually go out there and start spending the $10.4 million, let's have our discussion with our consultants, also go through the Nexus study, let's establish the policy, and then we can determine how much may be available for future funding for a match with the Public Works Trust Fund, with the Public Works related project.
Mr. Campbell, before you go on, just if the determination, though, were made that an escheatment process were needed, that's something that the city can do. It's just a process.
That's correct.
Right. It just takes a bit of time, and it requires a couple of council files and some city attorney action.
Yeah. Agree.
Okay, go ahead.
So at the end of the day, when we look at all the 101 minus the appropriations and the loans, we're left with about a $30 million cash balance. That includes a 25% reservation, or what we call working capital reserve funds, in our Public Works Trust Fund. We believe that 25% is a conservative number. It allows us to not only have that liquidity that the trust fund requires us to have, but also not go out there and over-obligate in terms of loans. So $30 million right now is currently available as of June 30, 2015. Caveat to that is that we actually did transfer about $10 million to the city for the B permits, and that was done in December 2015. So that $30 million was decreased by about $10 million down to about $21 million in actual cash available. Interestingly, when we went through our analysis, is that we found out that the top 5 accounts comprised 95% of the 6-year balance growth. Not surprisingly, our B permits was number 1 in terms of how much of that $32.7 million was attributed to these 5 accounts. $17.1 million was for B permits, $7.6 was attributed to our general improvement guarantee account, vacation accounts following excavation, and also the Million Tree Initiative, what we call City Plants Today, had about $2.1 million. So these findings are actually very interesting from an an analytical management perspective, because these are opportunities for us to look at how do we move this money in terms of getting the projects done and funded as quickly as possible. In regards to City Council and the CAO's office, how much of this money can be transferred to the general fund or special fund. So we now know our top 5 in terms of fund growth. We also know our top 3 in terms of balance that makes up the $101 million. One opportunity that we have seen also is interest earned. So we have earned about $4 million over that 6-year period. On average, it's about $666,000 per year. But with that, we also have lent out about 14 outstanding loans over the last 10 or so years. The average age of a loan is anywhere from 3 to 10 years. However, when we look at delinquency in terms of when that loan was due back to the Public Works Trust Fund, the average delinquency is anywhere from 3 to 5 years, meaning that they are severely overdue and we should be collecting. Unfortunately, due to staff resources and also with the economic recession, we were not focusing on collecting that money back. But now that we are now onboarding new staffers, we are going to start focusing on getting that money back for the Public Works Trust Fund by not only billing but also collecting that funds. The top debtors for that $30 million are really comprised of 4 departments. The CAO's office, about $17.1 million, Recs and Parks, about 8.8, Bureau of Engineering, 2.1, and Bureau of Street Services, 1.1. I have to highlight that the Department of Recreation and Parks, since we started doing our analysis, we have reached out to them, and they have made a payment in the amount of approximately $5 million from that $8.8 million. So even though it was outstanding as of June 30, 2015, it's now down to about $3 million. In addition to that, Project Restore has made a payment of $750,000 towards these loans. So that loan balance has actually decreased by about $8 million or so over the last 9 months. In terms of next steps and challenges, so this hasn't been an easy process. It's been very painful for my staff, and it's also been very rewarding for me and also eye-opener for me, because I've been able to learn not only the Public Works Trust Fund, but also learn the intricacies in terms of reconciliation and what does that mean for the accounting world, and how do we translate that to the common person that's listening to this presentation today. But in terms of next steps and challenges, the reconciliation has been the biggest challenge. We are committed to doing monthly reconciliation, and in addition to that, having continued governance and oversight. So I will continue these internal meetings on a monthly basis with staff so that we are kept back on schedule so that the next report comes out right in time for budget discussions. Also, fund transfers, making sure that any earned revenue that is in the Public Works Trust Fund is transferred over to the general fund or the special funds where it's appropriate. And then also doing some loan collections. One of the pain points for us has been resources, not only the human resource side of the house, but also the IT side of the house. So we are now working through that. Fortunately, we've been able to backfill about 14 different positions. The bad news is that Public Works Trust Fund only has 1 dedicated staffer, and we just made that dedication this July 2015 to move this project forward. Unfortunately, the grade level, I believe, is too low at this point. Right now, it's a Senior Accountant 1. The level that we have right now working with the Public Works Trust Fund is a transitory or a ladder position in which a senior accountant may move into a Senior 2 level classification. So therefore, the average person in this position lasts anywhere from 6 months to as high as 2 years, the average being 1 year. So as we're currently training them and developing the staffer, within 6 to 9 months, they're already receiving a promotion or they're transferring to a different classification because it's more money or just a different opportunity for them. So as a manager, I'm going to start working on how do we retain these individuals, perhaps maybe realigning the classification to where it needs to be so that we can retain this internal knowledge, intellectual knowledge, and making sure that it doesn't walk out the door in 6 months to a year, because then we start all over again from the beginning. In terms of potential interest loss, if we were to assess an interest-bearing feature to any of the loans, we would earn approximately $200,000 for the Public Works Trust Fund. That could be utilized for other projects or returned back to the general fund. The Nexus study, I spoke about that, and also obsolete Public Works Trust Fund subsidiary ledger. We are now currently working on removing that and retiring that system so that we can go into a web-based online Oracle system where we can now have the system interface with FMS on an electronic basis with the click of a button, and then having that reconciliation done automatically, and we can only deal with any exceptions or any accounts that were not balanced. So hopefully when that is in place, we would reduce the timing for reconciliation from anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. We can reduce it down to about 1 week, resulting in about 66% time savings for us. With that, I'll open it up for any questions. I know it's a detailed presentation, but I'm super excited that it's done after 6 years. I want to thank Vicki and her team, also Amy Chang, Evelyn Roki, who's here, Rosel Cavallari, and then also Rose Tang and Ching Iligan, that have helped us not only get to this place, but move this dialogue forward and start the dialogue with City Council and the Mayor's office. So with that, the recommendation is just to receive and file at this point in time.
Well, thank you, first of all, Mr. Campos, Ms. Santiago, and your team for bringing us to this point. We have made a couple of, over the years, budget requests for assistance, and we have a budget request in this year. Let's be optimistic and assume that that position is filled, that we get authority in that position, you're able to fill that position. Where will that help you here?
So, President James, the question was in regards to other positions that are in the pipeline being considered for the budget. That does not help at all. Right now, we currently have one dedicated staffer that's at a senior accountant 1 level. I believe that it should be at a 2 level, so that's something that I will be discussing with the CAO's office and trying to work with our personnel department to see how we can do a grade level upgrade and then figure out the funding that goes behind it. It's really not that much of an impact fiscally for us, but it does make a huge impact in terms of knowledge that walks out the door once they get promoted.
So we don't, it's what you were talking about earlier, we keep losing them to promotion. This way we don't lose them to promotion, so that that knowledge stays, that institutional knowledge stays there.
And the goal is to retain them a little longer. We know eventually they're going to promote, but keeping them anywhere from 2 to 4 years would be the ideal situation for us, or even longer. But 6 months to 1 year is just not feasible. It's not practical for us, but we keep going through the same process again every 6 to 9 months.
Okay. Commissioner Penning?
I just wanted to also thank you and Victoria and everyone who worked on it. I don't have any questions, but it sounds like it's been a lot of really detailed work, so thank you for putting this together.
I too. Forensic accounting is tough, and I think that's what you folks did. It takes a lot of pain, it takes a lot of discipline to go back and to really, so thank you, Fernanda, Vicky, and the entire Office of Accounting staff for getting us back to baseline. We can only move forward from here, so it's a good feeling. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also know that there's been significant work and communications with both the CAO's office and the Controller's office regarding this, as well as I've had meetings with the Controller's office. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I want to thank you as well. And obviously, in addition to the forensic accounting that we have done, I'm absolutely curious about when this whole thing started. I have some hypotheses in terms of history. I know that there was some federal influx of federal dollars to local government on public works, and I don't know how that relates to when we started, and if it was an effort to rebuild after the Second World War or whatever. But I'm curious as we move forward in helping to identify when this whole thing started, in addition to the great work that you've done on the forensic accounting. So I thank you for your work, and I look forward to the answer as to when this thing all started.
Commissioner, that's a great hypothesis. I think we've spent many months and many actually years, decades, trying to figure out the answer. And I think because the initial creation of the Public Works Trust Fund is so dated, 70, 80 years ago, our city's archivists may be able to answer the questions. We'll continue our efforts to search for those documents with our city clerk's office, and maybe out in one of our Piper Tech or one of our offsite record retention facilities. But I welcome that hypothesis, and I think it'll be a good endeavor for us to try to figure out what that real creation date was and why it was created at that time.
Well, there's great interest from the City Council as well, and of course, when you start looking at the Nexus study, the pre-1989 deposits versus the post-1989 deposits, there's because of state law, I believe.
State law.
Yeah, there was an alteration of the law at that time, back in 1989, regarding what the nexus requirements have to be. So it'll be an interesting process.
And the good news, now we know how much is pre and post 89 that may be available for our discussion, and then we now know what our cash balance is, which was something that we didn't know for several years. So I'm very pleased with the results and all the effort that our team has made to get us to this point.
Great. Thank you, sir. So the report will be received and filed. Agenda item number 7. Bureau of Engineering continued from February 12, 2016, recommending that the board first authorize $75,000 in additional contingency and approve a revised construction budget of $175,000 for the Sewers 5 La Cienega Boulevard project. Authorize the city engineer to issue multiple change orders to Matthew and Stewart Company for extra work to remove and replace the sewer during night hours for that La Cienega Boulevard 3700A project. Authorize $50,000 in additional contingency and approve a revised construction budget of $150,000 for the Sewers La Cienega Boulevard 3700B project, and authorize the city engineer to issue multiple change orders to Matthew and Stewart Company for extra work to remove and replace the sewer during night hours for the 3700B project. Mr. Louie.
Good morning. My name is Richard Louie with the Bureau of Engineering, and I am the project manager for the Sewers 5 program. This board report was requesting additional contingency for the program so that we could issue change order to do the work at night. This work is to install a new sewer in La Cienega Boulevard just south of the intersection of La Cienega and Rodeo, a very busy street. However, the police commission has denied the night work permit, and so we have to do this during the day.
I'm sorry, who did?
The police commission.
Oh, okay.
Contractor has to apply for a night work permit. So we are no longer able to do the work at night, and we are requesting the board report be withdrawn.
Oh, that's all we're doing. Okay. Well, that's pretty simple. Commissioner Penning?
Just wondering, why was the request denied by the police commission?
I didn't speak directly to the police. Your question was why was the night work denied? I didn't speak directly to the police commission, but the contractor did talk to the investigator. And what I understand is that when the investigator went doing outreach, knocking on doors, several people had concerns for the work being performed at night.
Noise?
Yeah. Because of that, the police commission denied the night work permit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, then I'll make a motion that it be withdrawn. Is there a second? By Commissioner Davis. Any objection? We'll withdraw it. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 8, a motion regarding recommending the board approve the Los Angeles Metro's contractor, Regional Connector Constructors, request to continue the temporary directional closure of westbound 1st Street between Alameda and Vignes Street until 9 p.m. on May 20th, 2016 to facilitate work associated with the Metro Regional Connector Transit Corridor project. Curtis G. Curtis, what we're doing here is continuing it from essentially now up through May 20th, right?
That is correct, yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I am Curtis G. from the Bureau of Engineering, Metro Transit Division. The Metro Regional Connector project is a 1.9 mile underground light rail transit system through downtown Los Angeles from the Little Tokyo station to the 7th Metro station. On December 18, 2015, the Board of Public Works adopted a report that granted the temporary directional closure of westbound 1st Street between Alameda Street and Vignes Street. This closure, this closure is currently set to expire at 4 a.m. on March 24, 2016. Metro and their contractor, RCC, is requesting that the end date of the temporary directional closure of westbound 1st Street be extended to 9 p.m. on May 20th, 2016. This extension is for the continuation of installation of soldier piles, deck beams, and the relocating utilities. When the December 18th report was adopted by the board, the westbound directional closure of 1st Street beyond the current end date was not supported by both LAD, DOT, and CD, Council District 14. Since that time, RCC has worked with LADOT and Council District 14 to develop a modified plan that will allow pedestrian access at the south end of the Little Tokyo Gold Line station, which was not addressed in the previously approved version of the traffic plan. LADOT does not object to this continued closure of the westbound First Street. Council District 14 supports the continued closure and has provided a concurrence on peak hour exemption associated with the directional closure. Metro has stated that they have provided advance notice and mitigating construction impacts for the community and stakeholders. Metro has stated that they have not been aware of any objections in continuing the proposed closure. Today, Metro and RCC have representatives to address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Any questions for the Bureau or for any of the representatives from Metro on outreach or anything else? I don't have any questions. Is there a motion? By Commissioner Repenning, I'll second it. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 8. Any problem sending it forthwith? We'll send number 8 forthwith so they can continue it since it expires at 4 a.m. tonight. Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 9, motion regarding Council District 6, recommending that the board approve the addition of the Public Works Trust Fund 834 appropriation account 5000BC as a source of funds for the Japanese Garden Service Agreement number C122941 for the City of Los Angeles Japanese Garden located at 6100 Woodley Avenue in Van Nuys. Mr. Green.
Good morning, Gene Green, Commissioners, everyone else here. I'm glad to be here again, and again, this is requesting, over the last 30 years I've been with the garden, we have used trust funds specifically that have to be spent back at the garden for different things. Lisa Mowry last year found out that this was not part of our last contract to add trust funds along with the SC&M funds. So she said get with it, and this is just a thing to be able to do things through the contract, such as we just bought a boat stone, we need to have it transported, we need to have it set with trust funds. The contractor is the way to go to do that. Otherwise, I have to go out and get another contractor. Another thing we use trust funds for would be if we have to have an event, we're going to have other additional events this next year, to rent tents and chairs and have the labor to set that up and take it down.
And Gene, so what you're talking about now, because the only question I had, one, I want confirmation from Mr. Campos procedurally that we can do this. I'm assuming we can, or it wouldn't be on the agenda. But I would like that verbal confirmation for the record. And then secondly, so what you're talking about now is the remaining encumbrance of the $20,000, the $20,000, plus the $75,000 encumbrance for the next fiscal year, correct?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. That is correct, President James. What the item before you, or the motion before you, is just really decreasing the funding that's going to be needed from SCM Fund 761 and increasing the use of the Japanese garden use fees that's in our trust fund, which ironically is today, or perfectly is today. We have $416,000 in that balance, so funding is available to move forward in this direction. All it is just basically switching out the funding sources.
Okay. Go ahead, Gene.
That's why I would say it's going to be a great option. We've done this over the last years, I guess, incorrectly. We're now correcting the situation to make sure it's funded appropriately. The current contract with Canal Crest, 3 years, is going to be up September 11th, 10th. We asked for the 1-year extension. We have 2 1-year extensions, and so it'll be coming to board to have it extended with the funding source joint with SC&M and trust funds. So the next year, starting September 11th, that'll be a joint funding source.
Okay. Commissioner Penning?
I apologize. I'm confused about what we're doing here. So we're encumbering $75,000 for next year and $20,000 for this year of Public Works Trust Fund dollars?
Yes, and we're disencumbering it from the SCM, correct?
What is the SCM?
Sewer Construction and Maintenance Fund.
Okay. So the funding for Japanese gardens is now coming out of the Public Works Trust Fund rather than the a fund at sanitation?
If the motion is approved, this would allow us to use $90,000, $20,000 this fiscal year, and $75,000 for next fiscal year from the Public Works Trust Fund, but it's through the appropriation of the Japanese Gardens use fee account. So we will not be using the entire trust fund. It's just those fees that were collected from the Japanese Gardens that can be used for the Japanese Garden operations as allowed and approved by the bylaws that were approved by this board.
So the funding is or is not from sanitation, or is it from Public Works accounts?
It's been from sanitation.
Historically, it has been from sanitation. The original contract that was approved was a $3.5 million. It basically reduces $90,000 to be used from the Japanese Garden use fee instead of using the SEM fund. So basically, it would be down to 3.41.
Okay, so what are we doing with the funding?
Examples I use is we want to get a boat stone. We need to have it bought through trust fund monies and transported and set. To be able to do that using the Caneo Crest current contract is the most efficient way to do it. They charge the 15%. If not, I will have to go out and rent a crane potentially. I have to go out and rent a backhoe potentially. So they have this equipment and they have the staff on site, and they give us the contract rates to do this thing. So we just had that done, so that saves. We had an event. We'll have future events. We need to have things set up for these future events. If we're having Mother's Day, for example, we'd set up, rent a canopy for our volunteers and our people doing origami or things to sit underneath, and that would come from the trust fund also. So it's really for the events, the cultural events, which is under the advisory group's purview, and also for purchasing things like antiques or things for the garden, which the trust fund is made to support these kind of activities to get culture to the garden and use trust fund monies. Again, $450,000, we didn't realize we had that much to start with. The advisory group has things they want to plan to do. This is just part of their program. Other things will be used for authority for expenditure. We're going to have a website developed, so that's going to be going through authority for expenditure, a different avenue.
So how are we able to, what is the decision-making or oversight process? Is it something over $5,000?
Well, the bylaws, the bylaw change references the oversight process, which you could summarize for us in response to Commissioner Repenning's question. And then I have a question to Mr. Campos. For a draw like this from the Public Works Trust Fund, does it not also require a council motion?
A draw like this does not require the council motion decision. This is funds that were already collected. These are use fees from the Japanese Garden, and so the bylaws allow this board to utilize that for that purpose. In addition to that, several months ago, this board approved the revised bylaws for the Japanese Garden, which did implement a staged or phased type of approval for authority for expenditures. So I believe, Gene, you would have to correct me, I believe anything up to $2,500 was allowed to be spent at the Japanese Garden level, and then anything above $2,500 would require 2 signatures, and then $5,000 and above would require you to come back to the board. Gene, you would have to correct me on those dollar figures, because I don't remember.
$5,000 from the advisory group, above $5,000, 1 to 10,000 to commissioners. Above 10,000 has to go to this group here, the city attorney, and for approval for anything above that.
So I stand corrected.
That's the level. So it's pretty defined.
Okay, I would
one
just say,
second.
I'm going to support this today. I think that $75,000 is a lot of discretionary funding for this purpose. As the sanitation liaison, I'd like to be aware of how we're spending it, even the smaller amounts. Thank you.
So, what I would recommend is, Gene, that as the sanitation liaison, Commissioner Repenning, for these expenditures should be notified of the expenditures as they are proposed.
Yes, we have monthly minutes taken for the advisory group. I can forward you the minutes. When they have these motions, it's just a motion to spend. It has to still be approved above $5,000 by 2 commissioners. If you want to be one of the 2 commissioners doing that, that would be a board decision. That would take care of anything above $5,000. That covers most of what you're concerned. Most of these things are not going to be spent on 75. It's going to be $5,000, maybe 10. We do have a website coming up, which is different. It's going to be for 20,000. But if you'd like to be part of that, 2 commissioner signature, that would work out perfectly for me. And if
That would be appropriate, given.
Sounds great.
Okay.
And I'll let you know in advance, and I can come down and inform you and talk to you. That'd be great. Absolutely.
Yeah, also, commissioners, if it gives you an extra layer of comfort in regards to how this money is being spent, it is going to be spent in accordance to the terms and conditions of the contract that this board has already approved. So anything that's not approved within that contract or within the terms and conditions, the scope of work, does not allow the Japanese Garden to spend this money. What the motion before you is just allowing them to use an alternate source of funding instead of using the SCM fund. So instead of the SCM fund taking the entire $3.5 million, they're proposing, the motion is basically proposing to use $90,000 from existing funding that's been collected through the Japanese Garden use fees for that purpose.
And that's the contract that's referenced in the motion?
That's the contract. So
Yeah.
the Japanese Garden or sanitation would not be allowed to spend anything outside of that scope of work or that terms and conditions of the contract that was before your board and approved by your board.
Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, my point of clarification was the scope of this proposal. So in fact, this particular proposal is only just for this action only. It is not to extend past this particular action at this time. Is that correct? Fernando?
That is correct.
Secondly, in terms of the SCM funds, the monies that are not being used by the Japanese Garden because of the alternate proposal here, how will those funds be available in the future? Or are they going to be utilized for anything else moving forward? And how do we assess the SCM fund in lieu of this proposal?
So I'll go ahead and defer to Jean in regards to how the funds in the Japanese Gardens are going to be used. The bylaws that were approved by this board does give the Japanese Garden some flexibility in terms of what they can spend up to a certain dollar amount. As corrected by Jean, it's $5,000. So anything within the approved bylaws up to $5,000, the Japanese Garden Advisory Committee has the authority to move forward in expending those funds from the Japanese Garden use fee account that we have within the Public Works Trust Fund. What they use has to be within the approved bylaws, but I would defer it back to Jean in terms of...
Regarding the SCM funds, it gets funded every fiscal year. It gets divided by budget for this fiscal year is $422,000 and split up into 2 encumbrances. So it's in the SCM fund is a big general fund under SCM funds, and it's allocated throughout the Bureau of Sanitation for work. Our part of the allocation for next fiscal year is going to be allocated on July 1, and then they're going to make another encumbrance probably midway through the year to see where we're going and how we're doing. So that's how it's funded. So it's really one fund. It's not really allocated to us in advance. It's all fiscal year, and it's presented in the budget process. So
I guess my question is, then do you anticipate in the future that you'll be using the SCM funds again perhaps next year as it relates to this
We will
expenditure?
always and have always used SCM funds as a mitigation for building the wastewater plant there. The way the organizational policy and the bylaws are set up is that the maintenance, base maintenance, my salary, some city salary, is on SCM funds. Anything that we're talking about on this trust fund is for the enhancement or improvement or special projects we have for the garden. So the maintenance will always be taken care of by SCM. This is just an opportunity to be able to use, as I discussed, for certain items and be able to use the trust funds. Other than the $75,000, there'll be more money out of the trust fund done through AFEs. So there'll be a separate AFE through the city attorney, through this board. They'll be separate from this kind of money here.
So you don't anticipate future expenditures coming from the trust fund next year as it relates to this particular expenditure? You anticipate
we are
that will come from
approving
SCM funds in the future,
No.
for example, next year?
SCM funds will be the lion's share. $70,000 will be trust fund. So let's say it's a $422,000 SCM fund. It will be reduced to roughly $70,000 for next year and $70,000 trust fund. The next fiscal year, we'll be coming back to the board to say, after we learn, next year we'll say, hey, it's good, it's not, we decrease, increase. It'll be a fiscal year by fiscal year request to the board. This one motion now is for the rest of this fiscal year and next year only. After that, there might not be any requests, might all go back to SCM funds. We just don't know yet.
Okay, so I guess what we can take away from this proposal before us today is that there will be a little more detailed processing, I guess obviously with the board liaison, who is Commissioner Repenning, in terms of future plans as to how we alternatively use SCM versus the public trust funds as it relates to the Japanese garden moving forward, I guess.
That is correct. Anything that the advisory group has a vote to expend the funds, and it has to go to the board to approve on all expenditures except over 5,000. In the future, from today on, when they do a motion to spend whatever amount of money it is out of the trust fund through the Canal Crest contract, Commissioner Pennyman and will be advised on the president of the board. Absolutely.
Because we recognize you have access to both funds, but some level of accountability would be very effective for our operation at the level of the Board of Public Works. So that I think that that is certainly advice well given, and hopefully it'll be well taken by the Japanese garden.
Yes. Currently on the Mayor's Advisory Group, there is a commissioner assigned. Commissioner Rodriguez is assigned to that group, is monthly involved in the group. And also we have the Council Office CD6 involved in that thing. And we also have the Mayor's Office rep on that, assigned to that advisory group. So other than accountability here, there's multiple levels of accountability and observation over the accounts.
Well, I think today's recommendation really comes comprehensively full circle in accountability, because even in those levels that you have mentioned, I think the board liaison is certainly absolutely critical, even though you have access to both funds. I think it's really a natural that that would be a part of the accountability process.
Yeah, always has been. Now we're just going to get Commissioner Penny involved. I mean, it's always been that way. Our advisor can only advise. Now they can improve on the 5,000, so absolutely, I have no problem with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Anything further? Is there a second? I'll make a motion regarding this agenda item number 9. Is there a second? Commissioner Davis, any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt number 9. Any problem sending it forthwith? We'll send number 9 forthwith. Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Campos.
Thank you.
Mr. Campos, have we cleared the desk?
Yes, you have, but just for a point of clarification on item number 6, my apologies, I was outside in the podium. Was there a motion on that item to approve the report and forward it to the mayor's office?
To receive and file.
So the city council would be receiving and file. Today's motion before you is to approve the report and then forward it to the mayor's office.
I thought you wanted us to receive and file it. You wanted us to adopt a motion to send it to city council.
Correct.
Okay, well then I'll make that motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Penning. Any objection? Without objection, we'll do so. Any problem sending it to them forthwith? We'll send number 6 forthwith. Thank you.
President. That does clear the desk.
Thank you.